the percentage of new donors that are required as recurring has stayed really flat at around 2% throughout this period.
Change is going to come from small nonprofits. And the reason I say that is that small nonprofits are in the community forming belonging relationships. The way we make decisions is not just cognition, it's emotion.
And the recurring giving sector was dramatically outperforming the S&P 500. And I said to myself, like, if I had $1, that's where I would put it.
The donor pyramid is becoming a donor community. I love that. Welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast. My name is Dave Rayleigh, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Center for Sustainable Giving. And today we have got a unique show for you. If you've listened to the podcast before, you know that typically the way I do this is that we have deep dive interviews with individuals that have something to say about recurring sustainable giving, whether that's nonprofit leaders, leaders in industry, folks that are in research, and specialists in subscriptions. Today, I actually have a whole series of guests lined up, and we're going to talk about one topic, and that is the future of sustainable giving. And this is a topic that has been in the sector for, candidly, centuries. Recurring giving is not new, but it's a topic that I think is more relevant than ever before for charities. And so just welcome to those of you that are listening live today. Whether you're live or you're listening to this later on, I am so grateful that you're spending time with us. So we've got a packed show. Let's get started. And I think the first place to start when we think about the future of sustainable giving is where we are at today. I think we're in a very unique time in history, really an inflection point. I mentioned that recurring giving is not new. Like if you go back into the study of human history, the earliest form of recurring giving was the ancient Jewish people and a practice that they called first fruits. This idea that every season, every new crop, every new season, the Jewish people would bring their first fruits, and they would bring that to the local authorities, to the temple, and that would be used for certainly supporting the priests, but also for the poor, the widows, and the orphans. So recurring giving is not new. In fact, if we look at the U.S. alone, the first recurring giving program was actually founded in May. As we record this, it's May of 1815. Was founded by an organization called the ABCFM, which is the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Mission. And so recurring giving, even in the United States, is not new. But the reality is it has historically not been for the vast majority of nonprofits. In fact, my estimate is about 75%. My estimate is that 75% of nonprofits have been historically left behind when it comes to growing strong, resilient, recurring giving. They're not one of the historical 3 types of recurring giving programs, which those recurring giving programs are what I would refer to as one-to-one recurring giving. And that's really been historically the gold standard. That's where the donor and the beneficiary are paired up in some way. The donor gives, they know either they know the beneficiary because they've been paired up with them, or as you might see in like a child sponsorship model, or they might know the beneficiary personally. And that's wonderful if your organization can do that, but there's a problem, and that problem is the vast majority of charities don't have the programs, services, or infrastructure to do a one-to-one style recurring giving program, which brings us to a second type of recurring giving historically, which has been membership. That's where the donor is at least partially the beneficiary of the services and programs that the organization provides. So think of your local zoo or museum or arts institution or public television or public radio. I've worked with a lot of content-oriented charities that provide education or resources for people, and they benefit the very same people that are often the donors. And once again, if you can have a membership-style recurring giving program, that is wonderful. But again, there's a problem, and that is that the vast majority of charities don't have the programs, services, or infrastructure to be able to build a membership-style recurring giving program, which has historically left the third category, which is literally everybody else. That's the left behind category. That's the 75% of charities that we're talking about today. In the US alone, that amounts to 1.1 million 501c3 nonprofit organizations that have historically been left behind. But there are two trends that have been reshaping recurring giving. The first trend is subscriptions. If you know me, if you know the work that we've done, there's a lot of parallels between the subscription economy and this behavior that we are now so used to with purchasing or subscribing on a regular recurring basis that has paved the way for fundraising. But on subscriptions, the average American today, well, first of all, 95.8% of Americans have at least one subscription, to perhaps no one's surprise. The average American today has 12 subscriptions. And when asked how much they spend on subscriptions on a monthly basis, the average American underestimated how much they spent on subscriptions by $133 a month. That's $1,600 a year, by the way, that we are spending on subscriptions that we don't even realize it. And fully 42% of Americans have said that they have forgotten that they were subscribed to a subscription that they were no longer using. By the way, I am raising my hand. I am in the 42%. But the reality is, what we're not trying to do is turn our donors into subscribers, but there are some clues that I think we can learn from when it comes to resilience, recurring giving that we can benefit from. And so, though the subscription economy is impacting the way we think about recurring giving, but donor behavior is also changing. 52% of millennials said that they would be more likely to give a monthly donation rather than a single large donation. And fully 49% of baby boomer and Gen X donors are already enrolled in a monthly giving program. And those numbers have been growing. And so this is a reality of what we've been seeing in this space. But I think what I'd like to do today is to really shed a light in really the full dimensions of what is possible for recurring giving. And so I've got a series of guests lined up today. We're going to be hearing from Samir Kahn, who's the director of research at GivingTuesday. We're going to hear from Dr. Sanjay Bindra, who's the president, co-founder, and chairman of the board at the GOSUMEC Foundation, a charity that has been all in on recurring giving. We're going to hear from Chris Free, who's the senior director of comms and fundraising at the Joshua Fund and the transformation that they've seen over the last few years with regards to recurring giving. We're going to hear from John McCoy and Becky Endicott from the team at We Are for Good and conversations they've had with hundreds of nonprofit leaders. And we're going to have a conversation that is super meaningful to me with Erica Waasdorp, who has really pioneered a lot of what we're seeing in North America, especially with regards to recurring giving. And so we've got a packed show today. I want to start by inviting Samir Kahn to the stage. Samir, you are the director of research at GivingTuesday. First of all, I thought GivingTuesday was just one day in November or December. Is it more than that?
Well, if it were, this would be a great gig that you're just working intensely for one day and coasting. But no, so Giving Tuesday works across the year in a variety of different ways. And the first primary way that people work with is with the network of people who are who put their hands up to the organization and said, hey, we're not just doing something on Giving Tuesday. We want to use this as a space to talk to other people who are doing things in their communities about Giving Tuesday. And we also have like a significant research arm. So the Data Commons Initiative was founded in many ways to meet that need, because a lot of people who were invested in growing the movement and growing the possibilities around Giving Tuesday and around the year were just really interested in data. And I think what we realized is, while there was a lot of data out there, there wasn't a single place where everybody could kind of come and look at the same, squint at the same data points. It was sort of fragmented around a bunch of different places. So we're trying to build a sort of industry collaborative for the nonprofit and social sector. And we do a lot of things, including things on recurring giving.
Yeah. Well, and I have grown to really greatly appreciate the work that you've done, not only to actually help people think more about generosity with Giving Tuesday, the actual giving day, but also the fact that the organization has really leaned into the broader sector and like, what does generosity look like, and what is possible, and not just here in the U.S., but globally. So, Samir, one of the things that, one of the key initiatives that I know you all focus on is the opportunity with recurring giving. And recently, you all came out with some recent data in conjunction with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. So I'd love for you to talk about that. What's, one, two, or three highlights that come from just looking at the data about what is going on with recurring giving today?
Sure. And thanks, Dave, for creating the opportunity for doing this. We put this stuff out, and then we hope that people see it, but then time passes, and so it's always good to reiterate a couple of messages. So last year we did some what we call envelope math, but backed up, methodologically documented envelope math to try to estimate what growing recurring giving could mean to the charitable sector market. And so we outlined a couple of scenarios which could unlock something between $10 and $20 billion in additional charitable revenue per year just by increasing the rates of recurring giving that we see across the US. And that's not just a wild thing to promise to do. This is actually more the norm in certain countries. If you look at Norway and Spain, recurring rates are much higher than they are in the States. We took that high level figure and we decided to do a little bit more exploration with our fundraising effectiveness project data, which some of you on the call might be aware of. And we developed a kind of a new algorithm to be able to detect recurring giving outside of what our data providers were able to show us. And so that allowed us to get a couple of layers deeper about the characteristics of recurring giving, the types of behaviors we think we can see, and also how organizations may or may not be leveraging this opportunity. I can go into some of those things if you want me to keep going.
No, let's
but if you had a
absolutely
question,
do. I think you're setting I think the tone, and I think this is critical. This, and it's not just sort of round pie in the sky figures. This potential for what this looks like in the sector writ large. I had done some of my own math on that. Hey, those 75% of charities and what's individual giving, and if we could see just a net increase of 5% per charity, blah blah.
yeah.
Blah, right? You do that math, I'd come to about $12 billion a year.
Yeah.
And so to then see a separate set of methodologies, by your team come to that between 10 and $20 billion. The reality is this is not a small opportunity. This is not like, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we could incrementally grow generosity? And so I think that's one of the reasons why, as I've seen it, on your radar, recurring giving is such a priority. And for the work that we are doing, this is not just a transformative moment. This is a transformative moment at scale. So yeah, let's dig into some of the things that
Yeah.
you're seeing on the recurring giving front.
So again, going back to the kind of the algorithm that we developed to allow us to detect different characteristics of different types of recurring giving programs. I think the one thing that struck us is currently the median organization has something like 4% of their donors on recurring schedules, which is stark, but also implies that there's a lot of room for growth. And where there is recurring giving growth, it might likely be on the larger end of organizations. And so we think that there's a lot of opportunity that people could be taking. One of the things that when you look at some of the rates of recurring giving, there's a lot. There has been some research, and we've done our own number crunching on FEP data to show that those rates have been growing, and that is super encouraging on the surface. But the problem is the growth seems to be coming more from retention. So the way I explain that is that when organizations are holding on to donors that they converted years ago, they're not really bringing new donors in, and that is actually a problem that we're beginning to find. The percentage of new donors that are required as recurring has stayed really flat at around 2% throughout this period. So that means that the recurring base is actually not expanding. It means that people are aging out, right? And without new donors entering this type of pipeline, I think that growth has a ceiling. So there's a good news, there's an opportunity there, but just in the current way of working, there are some warning signs there. And then I think the last one I'd just say is that there's different types of recurring behaviors. So the one that I think people think about most is the monthly schedule, and that makes up 2/3 of recurring arrangements. It's about something like around 84% of total revenue. And those monthly donors have this kind of median annual value of around, I think, almost $275
Hmm.
versus around $100 for non-recurring donors. So that's like 3 times the value that you get over the year. They're
Yeah.
the stickiest donor type. They tend to stay. And then one thing I thought that was really interesting is actually, and this gets back to kind of like learned behavior that people have about when you've signed up for a recurring donor. I think a lot of people think, well, we shouldn't bother that person anymore because we know we've already got them for recurring. We don't want to get them upset. But that might be true. Maybe 30% make a supplemental gift, but when they do, the median one-off gift of a recurring donor is larger than any other type of schedule of recurring donor,
Yeah.
and 2 to 3 times usually their average recurring amount. So to me, that feels like people who are recurring giving, there are opportunities on top of that because they're committed to the cause. They bought in, they're signed up for a monthly basis, and when the right pitch is made at the right time for the right need, there are opportunities for them to support with a bit more.
Well, and the way, Samir, that we've thought about it is that, and we've seen similar data in that your recurring donors are the most generous donors you have. And
Mhm.
they are, by definition, if you think about it, it's like, oh, yeah, they're the ones that are obviously bought into the cause. They're giving on a recurring basis, whether that's monthly or otherwise. I think the other two things I want to accentuate that you pointed out are number one, this is not like even growth across the sector. There are charities that are doing significantly more growth than others. And I think the question is, what can we learn from those?
Mhm.
Um, in fact, in the data, and I recently heard your colleague James sharing some of the data that you did, the percentage that stood out to me was 40% of charities received, and I believe, if I want to make sure I quote this right, but 40% of charities had no new recurring
Yep.
donors that were recurring from first gift, which was surprising to me, and another opportunity to say, like, what does it look like to actually invite people into a recurring relationship with the organization? So often when we work with organizations, the first thing we look at is, how do you talk about recurring giving? Do you even talk about it on your on your website? Like, do
Yeah.
you invite people into it? And so, for those 40% of charities, there's an opportunity there. And then I think the last thing I want to accentuate, and thank you so much, Samir, for coming on and for sharing with this. And we're going to point people to your resources. We've been sharing some of the blog and the research work. We're going to make sure those in the show notes. But is that not all recurring giving is monthly? Now, 2/3 of recurring giving is monthly, and that is a very strong, like that's the most default, understandable way. But don't sleep on other frequencies. I've seen some organizations do some incredible work with weekly recurring gifts. I'd love to
Mhm.
see more of that. A lot of more mature organizations are experimenting with an annual automated recurring gift. And so it's not just monthly. Now, monthly is sort of the easy button. It's the most convention. And so it's great. Like, let's do that. But to know that basically a third of recurring giving schedules are something other than monthly is also important for people to know.
Absolutely. And again, yeah, lots of opportunities for different types of people supporting the good work that people are doing. So I
Awesome.
hope this has been helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you, Samir. And thanks for the work that you guys are doing. Looking forward to seeing more on what's possible. And I just love the work that Giving Tuesday is doing. So appreciate you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. We love the work you're doing too. So
Awesome.
right back at you.
Good. Hey, as we think about the opportunity, I want to accentuate that this is not just an opportunity for those, 25% of nonprofits that have historically been able to grow recurring giving. It's for the 100% of nonprofits. It's for the other 75%. So I want to bring on now Dr. Sanjay Bindra. Sanjay, it has been a joy to get to know you over the past year plus. You have a heart for this opportunity, this area. As you think about being a leader, an investor, a donor to charities, I would love to just shine a light on some of the work that you're doing and really ask you to think about, what does it look like for sustainable recurring giving to be available to all nonprofits. Um, let's start there, and then let's talk a little bit about your story and the work that you're doing with GOSUMEC Foundation.
So thank you, Dave. So I'm a full-time physician and I'm not a professional fundraiser or fundraising consultant or in the data space. So as you know, 92% of all nonprofits are small and 80 to 85% of them operate without staff. And they've been left out of the conversation. So here you're talking of around 1.2 to 1.3 million organizations, and these are important organizations which service our community, whether it's after school care, pet rescues, or senior meal programs. And they're also important for the fabric of our community as well. And there is a lot of research on loneliness and how it impacts our health and how these community engagements can really help. So the other key statistic is that 30% of all nonprofits are going to fail within 10 years. So if you put that all into context, now you have a large number. In fact, the entire sector is almost small. A lot of nonprofits are failing. They're important for our community. And frankly, they're important for our health and longevity as well. So sustainable giving, hence, is extremely important. And 3 years ago, when we started GOSUMEC Foundation, which is a zero staff nonprofit servicing need and merit scholarships in India, like any scientist, before I embarked on anything, I was looking at literature, and these numbers which I shared were very depressing to me. And I said, we don't want to be number one, the organization which fails, and let's study it a little bit. And then I was going through a lot of data, including the FEP data, which talks that the first time giver returns less than 20% of the time. The most latest FEP data is 18.9%. But something really dramatic happens with the second gift. Moment someone gives a second gift, they return 60% of the time. So that insight changed everything for us. So when we built GOSUMEC Foundation, we said that we are not looking to grow more donors, but we want to be able to earn that second gift. And through the years, I realized that recurring giving is not a payment plan, unlike what is being talked in the literature, at least as far as a small nonprofit is concerned. It's an identity shift. It belongs to the community. It's social and relational. With that in mind, we embarked on the first case study coming out of a zero staff small nonprofit ever. Think about it, there are around 1.3 million small nonprofits, and you don't have a single study. And as a student of science, someone who understands the brain and neuroscience, I said this is going to be a behavioral experiment. So we have to be pure. We have to remove everything transactional is. So I know Samir talked about Giving Tuesday. We said no Giving Tuesday, no 30-day push, no last minute urgency. So no campaigns urgency and pressure. And let's build what I call the give arc. Give is essentially both a noun and a verb. It's essentially what we did. G stands for gratitude. I stands for impact. V stands for voice, which has been ignored in the both in the literature and all nonprofits, especially larger nonprofits, which it's difficult to carry for them. And E is engagement. So we went about in a scientific fashion, so creating gratitude loops and essentially creating belonging. And we mirrored what centuries old sustainable giving is. And actually, it's even before the 1800s, what you're talking about. It's for centuries together, the earliest form is religious form of sustainable giving. Whether you talk about tithing, whether you talk of dan, or whether you talk of dasban. So all cultures have had that in some form. And if you look at the participation there, it's close to 100% of those who are engaged. So essentially, what we found is that our results are similar to what those communities were when we brought in the social and relational element of belonging. So we've released our data out. Almost a huge number of our community is retaining donors, recurring donors, and they retain close to 100%, 98% was our figure. Both one-time donors converted and the new donors joined as sustainable givers, and there was a strong engagement. And the hypothesis that I came about after looking at the data, and remember that the sector data is horrible. We keep celebrating that recurring giving is growing exponentially. We talk about percentages like growth in
Hmm.
27%, income by 36%. If you look at the absolute numbers, they're so small. For a small nonprofit, which is about 463 members, the growth is just three recurring donors in 3 years, and the revenue to the nonprofit is just $2,000 in 3 years. At the same time, unlike the
Hmm.
large nonprofit sector, the revenues are nosediving.
Yeah.
You've lost about 24,800 in terms of the revenue. So the opportunity, as Samir also mentioned, is humongous and huge, but the percentage right now is just 3.4%. And I feel that the change is going to come from small nonprofits. And the reason I say that is that small nonprofits are in the community. Forming belonging relationships is a lot easier because you see these people in the grocery stores, in the basketball games, and so forth, and creating these gratitude loops, understanding that the way we make decisions is not just cognition, it's emotion and thinking, both feeling and thinking. And that is what we carried out. So, right on the
Yeah.
offset, we decided what we wanted to do, how we would do it, and what we would be doing, and what type of communication would be doing. And it was all around identity, trust, and belonging and community.
Yeah. Sanjay, there's so much to unpack there, but I want to dive in on just one thing to accentuate. Number one, sustainable giving is not a payment plan, it's an identity shift. I think that is just sums it up so well, not just for donors, but actually for charities and charity leaders. So Sanjay, what is possible? What do you believe is possible for all nonprofits when they go big on sustainable recurring giving?
So my experience is, of course, only in the small nonprofit space. And I think that small nonprofit space has a huge advantage because the reason is the voice element. It's very easy for a small nonprofit to have another member in and communicate and listen to them and engage them and bring them as part of the community. What I call is their owners and not donors. So
Yeah.
for a larger nonprofits, I think it's a little bit more difficult. So the opportunity of learning for the large nonprofit sector from the small nonprofit sector is potentially great once the small nonprofit sector understands that they are not large nonprofits miniaturized. So the identity formation element is much easier for a small nonprofit. The
Yeah.
way I go about it is that we've talked about religious nonprofits, identity is strong there. In our case, we're an alumni foundation, identity is strong there. So a pet rescue, the identity could be pet owners. For after school program, the identity could be parents and community. So what I'm trying to get at is that the conventional model of spray and pray and broadcast to a wide audience, I think we need to focus on the group is more likely going to engage with us, spend the time and effort on not getting newer donors all the time, but keeping the ones you have and build the relationship and community around it. And then the organization just becomes a throughput for the change that the donor wants to see in the world and how they see themselves in the picture. So
Yeah.
essentially, to me, sustainable giving is a behavior, but because giving is a behavior
Yeah.
and not a financial act, by the way.
Yeah. Well, this is Dr. Sanjay. One of the reasons I've really appreciated getting to know you, as you said, you're not a professional fundraiser. You're not even quote unquote on staff with your organization. You care deeply about this. So thank you for what you're doing, for investing in this sector, and for shining a light on how this is not just for big nonprofits, right? This is for all nonprofits. And so appreciate you And looking forward to continuing to hear the updates on how things go with what you're doing at GOSUMEC.
And thank you very much for bringing the small nonprofit conversation, both in the earlier podcast that I have. And essentially, I think small nonprofit sector will be very grateful to be included in the conversation because they've been left out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Bindra. Over the past few years, as we've worked with dozens of organizations to grow sustainable recurring giving, I keep hearing the same thing from leaders. They don't just want tactics, they want community. They want to know that they're not doing this alone. And for some teams, they're not quite ready for our sustainable giving deep dive accelerator, but they are ready for something more accessible, something that helps equip them, not just one person, but their whole team. That's exactly why we created RISE. RISE is a new implementation-focused group advisory program designed to help organizations grow recurring giving that actually lasts. It's a place where we turn insights into action, and then action turns into momentum. Inside our RISE program, you'll get live group advisory calls, office hours with me, ongoing education and training, access to guest experts, and a private community where you can ask questions, share ideas, and learn from peers who are wrestling with the same challenges you are. You'll also have access to our advisory team, so when you're stuck, unsure, or deciding what to try next, you're not guessing alone. Here's the heart of it. You don't have to grow sustainable giving on your own. RISE is where leaders grow recurring giving together with guidance, accountability, and forward momentum. Enrollment is open now, and if this sounds like something your organization or your team needs, I would love for you to learn more or raise your hand. You can visit sustainablegiving.org/RISE to explore the program or to express interest. We'd love to have you grow with us. Again, that's sustainablegiving.org/RISE to sign up or let us know that you're interested. Looking forward to seeing you in the program. You know, I mentioned the 1.1 million and Dr. Bindra nailed it on the head. If we're going to really impact 1.1 million nonprofits that have been historically left behind, the reality is 90+% of those are small, one staff, no staff nonprofits. And so at the Center for Sustainable Giving, we basically care about one thing, and that is growing generosity. What does it look like to create more sustainability for more organizations and to grow generosity? And we basically do that through two things. We educate leaders, we teach leaders on how to grow sustainable giving, and then we help them do it. And so on the education side, at the center, we provide workshops, training, content. Many of you are readers of the WAVE report, our weekly column on all things innovation and growing, especially recurring giving. We've got the book, The Rise of Sustainable Giving. We just released the audio book for The Rise of Sustainable Giving. And so we want to equip leaders to be able to help to grow recurring giving. And that's the education side. The way I said it to a friend this week, it's we want to teach them to fish. You know, we've all heard that metaphor before, right? We want to teach nonprofit leaders how to grow recurring giving. And so we have a huge educational component. But really the other side of the coin of what we do at the Center for Sustainable Giving is we actually advise organizations on how to grow recurring giving. And so for some number of organizations, it makes sense for us to come alongside them. And what we do in that is we help them by doing a deep dive assessment, 10-point assessment, and a roadmap, 2-year roadmap for growing sustainable giving. And so it's really this question of like, do we have the knowledge? Do we have the beliefs to be able to grow recurring giving? And so much of what Dr. Bindra shared is around just having the beliefs that this is for us. The data that GivingTuesday is continually working on and understanding is how do we make this, how is this more accessible to more charities? On the advisory side of what we do, it's how do we then equip them to actually take advantage of it? And so it's one thing to say this is an opportunity, it's another thing to actually take advantage of it. And so at the Center for Sustainable Giving, we basically do education and advisory. We teach leaders on how to grow sustainable giving through our workshops and other content. And then we actually walk alongside them and help them grow recurring giving through this deep dive assessment and roadmap process. And so that's something that I'm deeply passionate about. It's not okay to just know or to have knowledge. In fact, by the way, before we go to our next guest, I have a surprise for everybody. I just had a conversation with our audiobook publisher, One Audiobooks, and they've agreed that every person today will get a free audio edition, 30-day audio edition of The Rise of Sustainable Giving as just an act of generosity from us, from the center, and from One Audiobooks to you. And so if you're on the podcast today, you will be getting a copy, an access code for that. If you are listening to the podcast, I'm well aware that some of you are listening to this while you're mowing the lawn or driving, to work or whatever. And if you are listening, I'm going to give you a URL. So go to sustainablegiving.org/gift, sustainablegiving.org/gift. And we have limited supplies, limited codes. But if you are able to, we would love to send you a copy of the audio edition of The Rise of Sustainable Giving. And so that's just from us to you. And as we record this, we've got plenty of copies. And so go ahead and get in on that. And we'd love to send you a copy. We've talked about what the center exists to do, educate and advise and walk alongside organizations. I want to just shine a light on the transformation that's possible through that. And so I'm going to invite my friend Chris Free, who's the Senior Director of Communications and Development at the Joshua Fund. I'm going to ask Chris to join us and just talk a little bit about the transformation that they've seen and that, Chris, you've seen as a leader in the Joshua Fund and in the work that you've done over the last few years. So welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks, Dave. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So you and I met going on 3 years ago, and you went all in on recurring giving. We've talked a lot today about belief and about that kind of belief preceding growth. Tell me about that. Like, why were what was the context that led you to think, I think recurring giving is for us, and then we'll talk about what you did about it.
Yeah, we were in a situation. When I came to the Joshua Fund, for those who don't know, the Joshua Fund is a Christian nonprofit, exists to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus. We work in Israel and the surrounding countries, so Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, Palestinian territories. There's a lot going on there right now, and we were in a situation where I came to the organization. We were about $5.3 million, and that was after about a 5 to 7 year decline in revenue. And I was brought in to try to help figure out, like, how do we solve this issue? And from that 5.3, we were able to get some growth up to 7.2, but we just couldn't break through anything there. We would have situations where there were natural disasters, which is when we would see a significant bump, but then 13 months later, those donors would cycle out of the organization. And we were struggling to find, what could we do that would present a predictable way for us to, set a trajectory into the future where growth would be, predictable. And we couldn't find that. And so that's what kind of set me on a journey to find a solution to that problem.
Okay, so you had this kind of realization that the sustainability steady funding wasn't where it needed to be, right? You had these moments of crisis that would break out, and donors would come in, and then they would lapse or not renew or whatever, right? And so that's where you and I had a chance to connect with the center, talk about a little bit about what you did, what we did together, and especially highlight what those results have been.
Yeah, well, I mean, just so everyone knows, the way I found Dave is I want to work with the best people in the world, and so I went on a journey to find who is that, and I landed at Dave Raley, and the thing that showed me that was there's a slide in his deck, in his presentation, if anyone has ever seen it. It shows the S&P 500 and the steady 11 to 12% growth for since the beginning of eternity. And then there was the recurring giving sector. And the recurring giving sector was dramatically outperforming the S&P 500. And I said to myself, like, if I had a dollar, that's where I would put it. And if I had an organization to lead, that's where I would put it. And so that is, where I was like, Dave is the guy. I'm all in. Whatever this man is saying, let's figure out if it works. And so there was a period of trying to, after I understood what Dave was doing, trying to convince our board about it, trying to convince our leadership that this was the path that we were going to go down. We're very fortunate. Our founder, Joel Rosenberg, he's a New York Times best-selling author. He and his wife Lynn started this organization. They were on board. Our executive director, Kelly Drury, she was on board. Our board of directors, they were on board, but it took some time to get there. And so once you got that buy-in, once everyone realized, okay, this is the path forward, then we started down the path with Dave. And he gives you this kind of 2-year roadmap. And that roadmap was it was a lot of work, and it was overwhelming. And it was one of those things where we were like, where do we start? Well, Dave was very kind to prioritize that roadmap for us to say, these are the biggest things that you could possibly do to help your organization. And so we just started ticking them off, one at a time, optimizing this, 1% improvement here, 2% improvement there. Well, that didn't work. Try something else. And so that iterative process over time, while it took a lot of work and there were a lot of action items, we started to see improvement there. And by improvement, I mean, so we were, Dave has you benchmark every single thing that you do across your organization and the things that you'll need to improve. And September 7th, 2023 was when we did all of that benchmarking. It was 1 month before our organization and the entire landscape of where we work kind of changed forever when October 7th happened. And that when we benchmarked that, we were at $7.2 million in revenue. Now we're at 14.4 million. So about 2x growth that we've experienced since September 7th of 2023 in revenue. On a recurring donors side of things, it was 1,885 donors. In the, I don't know if you know this, Dave, but in the kind of projected growth in there, you said, I think within 2 or 3 years, you should be able to double that. I was like, double it? What do you mean? Well, now we're at 4,080 donors. We have over doubled
Wow.
the recurring donor file, which is just thank you. And then 18 months donors in terms of up to the point on September 7th, we had 7,528. Last 13 months, we've had 13,609. Our digital recurring revenue, which is the easiest thing to track. You were very wise to say, if you can't track it, don't try to improve it, but figure out how to track it. So we track digital recurring revenue. That's now at 48% this month, up 36% year over year. Top 2% of nonprofits by revenue. Best 2 fiscal years of revenue in the history of the organization since we started working with you. On track to beat the second best year of revenue right now. And it's all because of that very slow and steady build in the recurring revenue file. And we have totally changed the way that we look at the way that we talk to donors. Like for the most part, for Gen Pop donor, like we're asking for the recurring gift. We're not asking for one-time gifts. And for those people who they still give one time, we're targeting the communication to them to try to funnel them into the recurring giving file. And then we're creating a very specific communications frequency to talk to monthly donors and thanking them for what they do. And it's the way that we think about this, the from the beginning to the end has totally transformed. And it's taken some time to get there. But thank
Yeah.
you so much, sir.
Well, and I couldn't be more thrilled for the organization, of course, for the results, but for you as a leader, and the thing we started this conversation with, which was you believed, like, you didn't think this was going to be easy. This is a lot of work, but I think this is for us, and I think this is for now, and I think that's a lesson I think any leader should be able to take away. And that's, I mean, when I think about the mission for the Center for Sustainable Giving, it is to create that belief. We can't do it alone, but we can help shine a light on what is possible, and then walk alongside organizations to actually help them see that come to pass. And so, when you texted me a few weeks ago that you had passed that 4,000 recurring donor mark, it just warmed my heart. I was at an event in Dallas, and it was just like, okay, this is great. This is why we do the work, and this is why I think this is such an important topic for the sector. So appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for joining us today and for sharing your story. For folks who are interested, we did a whole episode of the podcast on the journey that you've taken, so you can take a look at that. We'll put that in the show notes. But appreciate you.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, next I want to bring up my friends Becky Endicott and John McCoy. Becky and John are the co-founders and hosts of We Are for Good. They are leading the Impact Uprising, and I'm all in. And guys, you have had last I counted over 700 conversations. These are recorded conversations. You've probably had 5,000 conversations, but
Weren't
or
you episode
10,000.
700? You were right in there
I'm so
recently.
glad you're in so many of them. Yes.
Yes, I made it into two. So as a percentage, no, it's just, one of the reasons I wanted you on the show is you see firsthand what leaders face. Like day to day, you cover all of the topics. You cover the fundraising and, the mental health and the realities that nonprofit leaders face. And so I wanted to just give you a stage to share, what are you seeing that nonprofits leaders are dealing with, and what's the opportunity here? Like, if we can create sustainability, um, if we can change January 1st from the worst day of the year to
Right.
another day in which I have my funding already, stable and secured, what is that going to mean to the kinds of leaders that you're talking to?
Oof. I mean, I love that you camped out on the word sustainability and you're wearing it on your clothing now, Dave. It's like you started a brand over here.
So
But
smart,
I do
Chip.
think that's the right framing is because it's about how we're building a sustainable type of organization from the inside out. And that's what we see talking to change makers everywhere. Everyone is burnt out, overburdened, overworked. The constant influx of media coming in the door and kind of throwing us into a tailspin. But like this is the core work of relational building that snowballs over time. It's very much our story with We Are for Good, and we see it in the organizations that we track too, is building with your believers and building a sustainable base that's a lot more resistant to the change that's coming at us. And Becky, I'll let you talk, but I think this is serendipitous that I got an email from the Adventure Project, which is one of the organizations we support on a monthly basis. Love them. You probably coach them too. Let's give
Love
a
it.
shout out to Becky Straw. But I think it's really cool because not only did they communicate to me as a monthly donor, but they're telling the story of what sustainable projects like do for a community. And it's like I had chills
Oh,
reading
that's
it because I'm like,
good.
this is what we're talking about. Sustainability moves us from uncertainty to feeling like we have control. And that's exactly what this conversation's about. And I felt that as a donor of like, man, that's the kind of project I want to support. But it's like, this is the kind of work we want to pour into too, because it fills our soul and it keeps us from kind of the tailspin that I was just mentioning a minute ago. So I feel like it all connects. I feel like
Yeah.
the word
Yeah.
is right now. Thank you for that.
Becky, what about you? I mean, I think you have just such a good, deep empathy for leaders. Like, that's one of the things, even when, anybody gets a chance to hang out with Becky in person, highly recommend it. You just feel cared
I will
for.
love you so hard.
You
Yes.
were
The
That's
so
probably
good
trademarked
at
harder than
that.
Becky
you want.
hug. Yes.
So what does this mean? Yeah, what does this mean for leaders in that sense?
I feel like we're surrounded so much right now by this doom and gloom of the sector. And for me, when I think of monthly giving, to me, it is like expressively the great hope
Mm.
because I see us starting to collapse those donor pyramids that have really kept us in chains. And we're sort of flipping that pyramid on its head and we're saying, oh, actually, the base can be even more powerful than that pinnacle of that donor who can make a super gift because we're not looking at it purely from a financial exchange. And what I mean by that is that recurring revenue is about like recurring trust. Donors don't want a payment schedule. They don't want to be involved in that. They want to be a part of moving something the needle on something big, through collectiveness. And so I really feel like we're seeing like that donor pyramid give way to donor community. And what we're seeing is people are getting their identity wrapped around their giving. And I love this example, John, you just gave for the Adventure Project. I give to Sheaves the First. They're one of, I give to six monthly organizations, monthly giving. And they know me so well, they know I'm a runner. And so every year they ask me if I would like to run the New York City Marathon on their behalf. And
So
holy smokes,
smart.
I actually would. It's on my bucket list. But like you're engaging in a different way because I have identity with She's the First. I am not just putting my monthly gift in like my Netflix and my Spotify. What I'm doing here combined with the collective action of so many people can move the needle in a way that inspires trust. And guess what? It makes me want to show up in ways that are beyond financial. I don't want to just give money. I want to share my story. I want to bring my friends. I want to run about it. And as I'm training, talk about why girls' rights and giving a girl her future is so important to me and why it's connected to
Yeah.
my giving and my identity. So I think we're in such an interesting inflection point, and this is such a cool pathway to get there.
The donor pyramid is becoming a donor community. I love that. And it's Dr. Bindra said a few minutes ago, it's not a payment plan, it's an identity shift. It's like,
Love
there's some
him.
things in the water, right?
He's so
And it's
smart. I
Yep.
like,
love him.
So
what can
wise.
we learn from this sector around how do we grow generosity and participation? So I'll leave you with one question I would love to hear from each of you. Think about your next 700 interviews. I mean, maybe not all at once. That's probably a little stressful. But the next
More gray
700
hair.
leaders, let's imagine a world in which those 700 leaders have a sustainable base. They're bringing in
Mm.
25, 50% of their what they need to actually accomplish what they're exist to do. How does that change the conversation over the next couple of years?
Ooh.
I mean, the word that comes to mind is expansion. I think when we talk to leaders that are resourced or maybe they have the funding piece figured out, we just had this conversation on the pod this past week. You can actually dream again. And that's the place that we need to be in is getting into those hopeful conversations of what could be, not just trying to keep the lights on, but like, what does actual transformation look like? What's that story of hope that we actually can realize? I think we have to get out of the scarcity to be able to have some of those conversations. And so I'd love to have more of that. We're kind of geeks about that. And philanthropy is the path to that being possible. What about you, V?
To me, it's just it is we give way to this is me and mine and my mission and my specific thing, and we open ourselves up to generosity being the identity for all of us. And
Mm.
not one person plays in one area, we play in many areas because we're pushing toward the same goal. And I think for the nonprofiteer, this gives me such hope because we talk about burnout. This is not all on your shoulders anymore. Now you have an army, a squad of people behind you who are helping translate the mission and vision into its greatest and most fullest form. And they're doing that not just with their giving, they're doing it with every level of currency that they can bring through their network, through their ingenuity, through their contacts, through their unique gifts. And that is what is to be celebrated. And that story is your opportunity to bring others in because they want to see themselves in that story.
Yeah,
Boom.
yeah, absolutely. How do we help more people see themselves in the story? of the causes that we represent, of just being a generous human being. I mean,
Hmm.
last thing I'll say is I just came back from a conference in Chicago, and I was hanging out with a leader, and she posted on LinkedIn over the weekend. She mentioned a conversation that we had had, and she said, I just chose to give to one of my favorite charities on a recurring basis. And it was like to see her own identity,
Right?
shift, right? To say, like, I am a generous person, but why wouldn't I do that in a way that's sustainable for the charities and expresses who I am? And so
Hmm.
it warms my heart. I hope that's what we see. I mean, when we think
It's
about the
going
future of
to.
sustainable giving, and hopefully the center is a piece of that future, right? I am so looking forward to those days. So Becky and John, thank you. Keep at it. Looking
Thank you,
forward to
friend.
the next 700 interviews. Maybe at one of those I could join you again.
Heck yeah. Come back for many more, my friends. We appreciate what you're
Appreciate you.
building.
Congrats on the
Take care.
launch.
Awesome.
Yep.
Love
Thanks,
this.
guys. I want to invite one more guest up, somebody who's very special to me, special to this sector. If you don't know Erica Waasdorp, you're about to get to know Erica Waasdorp. Erica graciously was on the show a couple of episodes ago. And so, Erica, when I first started to see, I've been doing fundraising for more than 20 years, and that has included recurring giving. But it was really in the last 5 years that it was like, okay, this is changing. There's something going on. There's something in the water. I said, I'm sure there's a book. Somebody's written a book about it. And I found two books from Erica Waasdorp on monthly giving. And so, Erica, you've been invested in this sector for more than 30 years. We'll leave it at that. You have thought about this, particularly in North America. Even your background, I just get a kick out of the fact that even before fundraising, you were with Reader's Digest, which is like the quintessential subscription. You've written the books. And so I just want to conclude our time as we think about the future of sustainable recurring giving and what's possible, to just tee you up to be able to share like what you've seen the history, but you also have a taste of what's possible in the future. And I want, especially if you would, just talk about what you're seeing globally. You just told me about some conversations with some leaders in Australia. Like, this is not just a US or a North America specific conversation.
No, that's great. Thanks again, Dave, for starting the center. It's really, really exciting. Well, I mean, first of all, I think I'm very excited about all of the statistics that are popping up now. So in the US as well. So, and I think that's where again, like starting your own organization and benchmarking yourself is a good idea. And being Dutch originally, having worked in Europe for international organizations. Um, to be honest, I mean, a lot of countries, especially in Europe and Australia and Canada, have been doing recurring giving longer than here in the US.
Hmm.
And we as consultants, you and Harvey McKinnon and Ken Burnett and Sean Triner in Australia and a number of other ones, and all of those on the podcast today. um, again, it's important to look at what is happening in some of those other countries, like the UK. I mean, what are the trends there? What have they tested, right? And what is working there, right? And can we bring that to the
Yeah.
US? Again, SMS, texting. I mean, that's been very popular. I mean, face-to-face fundraising has been very popular in those countries. So digital campaigns have been integrated campaigns. So it's really interesting to definitely make sure that we share that information and
Yeah.
say, okay, well, yeah, we can learn from that. Retention efforts that they've done, and as Chris has said earlier, it's the little things, right? There's a lot of little things that work,
Yeah.
and we can borrow from what other organizations are doing in other countries, especially. So I think that's where I think we, can bring that collectively to the center
Yeah.
and to the nonprofits here to learn from.
Well, and you and I have talked about this is not a, again, not a new phenomenon. If we were in, especially Western Europe, Scandinavia right now, right? Like recurring giving has been very common. So I think there's a lot we can learn from that sector. There's a lot of areas I think where this is growing. I just spoke to an organization that's based in Haiti, and they said they actually have 30 local Haitians that are bringing and giving on a monthly basis, and it's a part of that. So I think this is a global opportunity. I want to give you a chance to give one last word before I wrap up with a few comments. Think about the next 30 years of sustainable giving. Are you optimistic? What's your perspective on what is possible for these charities that have been left behind?
Yeah, I mean, I am very optimistic because again, I think it starts with like that believing, and I'm seeing more and more nonprofits, no matter what size, are starting to believe that it is possible. Again, those studies like 10 to $20 billion. I mean, what's not to like, right? So I'm obsessed. I want to just like throw out one more thing. What's next is
Yeah.
that once you have those recurring donors, think about that legacy giving opportunity, right? I think that's like huge. I started doing some research recently with a couple of organizations, and we looked at that connection, that belonging, that feeling of community that recurring donors have. That is then going to be that final ultimate gift.
Yeah.
And you're blowing in one organization, the average legacy gift was $50,000.
Yeah.
So, and they were like $20 a month folks, while they were giving.
Yeah.
So just like that, I think that's like the another huge opportunity. And if you want to give that as an incentive to a leader, saying, hey, you're like, here is what you're looking at down the road, right? So it's going to be sustainable giving and sustainable support for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and it's only growing. I mean, you mentioned legacy giving. The latest data that I saw was the average recurring donor is 6 times more likely to
Yes.
leave an organization in their estate. I think that's key, but also I think about the younger generation. My kids are growing up in a world in which subscriptions have always been, just like people who grew up as digital natives, it's just a part of who we are. And so I'm very optimistic. I think we've got the next several generations, candidly, of increasing this and moving beyond that checkbox.
Hmm.
And as Sanjay said, to really creating identity shift. So, Erica, thank you for your investment in the sector, for continuing to invest, for your support of others in this space, and highly just grateful for you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us as you think about the future of sustainability for your charity, for your organization. There's so much more to come. My hope is that the Center for Sustainable Giving becomes a tent pole, a gathering place in the industry for leaders who care about sustainability and growing generosity. And so if you are interested in being a part of that movement, in getting, emails and updates, in either coming to our sustainable giving workshop, which is this September, 2.5 days in Seattle, or in potentially working with our team to grow your sustainable giving, just head to sustainablegiving.org and you can find all of that information. We'll include links in the show notes. If you are looking for the workshop, that's easily sustainablegiving.org/workshop. If you're looking at potentially working with us to grow your program directly, that's just sustainablegiving.org/grow. So /workshop/grow. If you're interested. And again, thank you for what you're doing to grow yourselves personally, professionally, and your organizations to create more sustainability. And we're just so grateful for you. And until next time, this has been the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope that you've learned something new today and that you've benefited as well. And for our listeners, thank you for going a little bit over here. I know we went a couple minutes over, so appreciate you. We'll make sure to get you a copy of that free audiobook. If you already have a copy of the audiobook, you're welcome to forward the code that you get to somebody who you think would benefit from the audiobook. We would love to bless them with that, and appreciate you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with insights that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For even more resources to help you build a thriving recurring giving program, go online to sustainablegiving.org. That's sustainablegiving.org. And lastly, if a leader comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference they need to start growing sustainable recurring giving for their own organization. Until next time, thanks for joining us.